All right, welcome to 939 Module 5, Lecture 5, and continuing to talk here about strategic thinking, and in particular now looking at those competencies, as the book calls them, in regard to strategic thinking. We talked about scanning, and so in this lecture I want to talk about visioning and then reframing. And visioning, now we've already talked in this course about the visions or the organization's vision statement, but what about your department, your program, or your unit, or your team? Do you have a vision statement? And I think a lot of times we think of the organization overall having a vision statement, but I think even your department, program, unit, team, again, however you're broken up, I don't know everyone's situation, but I think you should have a vision statement for yourselves. Now, one of the things that I point out there is it should be connected to the overall organization's vision statement. Just like if you have, I think each group, it's a good idea to have a mission statement. And your mission statement should not be radically different from the organization's mission statement. It should flow from it. The same with the vision. If your college that you're a part of has the vision to be, leading healthcare college in the region, I would hope that your vision is going to be kind of tied to that for your particular program, not going off into left field or something like that. So it should be connected to the overall vision, yet at the same time, and I don't want to say but, because if you say but, it cancels out everything you just said, right? So I'll say and. It should be connected to the overall vision, and it can also be somewhat daring and disruptive. So you don't have to play it safe with your own department group's vision statement and just kind of regurgitate what the vision or organization's vision statement is. You can still be daring and innovative, somewhat disruptive, so to the status quo, which might then engender, and this is where you're being a strategic leader and demonstrating strategic leadership, that might then create some stir and some disruption, and you can actually then be a bit of a game changer within the organization as a whole, kind of shake up the status quo. So, for instance, again, the overall vision may be to be a leading healthcare college in the region. That's great. But maybe in your department, I'm obviously using the college example, but maybe in your department what you've seen is we have a disturbing lack of diversity among faculty and students. And in, I'll just use nursing as a very broad, general area, but nursing as a whole within our area, we have a lack of diversity. And so maybe your vision for your department or program is to create, and I'm coming up off the top of my head, but to bring about more diversity within your program, right? That's your vision. And by the way, from there, you can flow some really great objectives and goals and strategies and tactics as far as how you're going to look at this and approach this. So, again, that can be somewhat disruptive and daring to the status quo. And maybe nobody's really thinking about it at the really big level. And so you start it in your area, your department, and then it grows out from there. So that's just an example. And I think the benefit to the members of your team or your group or your department is that it helps them, just like overall vision for an organization, it also helps your team to be engaged and inspired. And again, it does not have to be earth-shattering. Now, maybe that diversity example for your area, maybe that would be earth-shattering, but it doesn't have to be. So I don't, that's more for organizations. I think at Disney's, I shared that one with you, to be the entertainment leader in the world or something. You don't have to be that big, that high pie in the sky kind of idea for your department. It can still be aspirational and inspirational, even if it's not that big. As an example, maybe you want students to have an excellent experience from admissions to graduation, right? Okay, so then you ask, well, what does that look like? And then that's how you write up your vision. So the vision statement is, I guess you could have that as a vision statement, but maybe your vision, maybe that's the overall organization's vision statement. And then for you, you say, okay, what does that look like? Give you a quick example of that, and then we'll move on. But when I was at Bob Jones University, I helped start, a team of us started a Center for Leadership Development. I was still teaching in the Division of Communication, but then also we started working on this because, and that's how we articulate it. And by the way, that's a great way to think about it. What do I want students to say, or how to articulate this? Because Bob Jones had done leadership development things, especially as a liberal arts school, really since it was started. So this was nothing new to them as far as developing students in leadership areas. But there wasn't a unified, cohesive, organized attempt at it. And so, and I borrowed this idea. I'll take another step back. I got this idea, and it might help you a little bit too, from Robin Lindbeck is her name, Dr. Robin Lindbeck. She helped us with a lot of leadership development programs at State Farm. And so I had worked there. Then I went to Bob Jones. And her statement was, her goal for the leaders that she worked with was, and I mean, okay, forgive the creepiness of this. She said, I want to be able to sneak into your house at night. Of course, all the managers are like, what? And she said, I want to be able to sneak into your house at night and shake you awake in the middle of the night and say, quick, tell me, what's your job? What do you do? And she said, my goal is that if I did that, you would say, I'm a leader. My job is to be a leader. And I loved that kind of mental image, not the sneaking into people's house part, but because her point was so many, and we had a lot of our managers, if you asked them, what's your job? They would have said, my job's in auto claims. I deal with claims, or I'm a claims team manager, rather than I'm a leader of people. And so that's what she was going for. So I kind of got that idea, and only the way I framed it or stated it for our folks when we were working on this at Bob Jones is I said, listen, I think right now, if our students march across the platform on graduation day, they get their diploma. If we grabbed them, most of them, as they were coming off the stage and said, hey, do you think Bob Jones developed you as a leader? I think most of them would have said yes. But then if we said, tell me how, quick, tell me 2 or 3 ways, I think they would have been hard pressed to come up with tangible ways. So again, it was happening, but it wasn't real obvious. And my contention was, if we make it obvious and make it tangible, then we're going to do an even better job. So that's the way I articulate it. Our vision was, for the CLD, we had a mission statement, but our vision was that students will be able to identify how Bob Jones University developed them as leaders. And it was aspirational at the time. And so, so then the way, again, that I kind of dramatized that was when we grab them after they march across the stage. Did we develop you as a leader? Yes. How? Well, you did this, 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 and this. Boom, we've been successful. So that's just an idea real quick. So again, that's not earth-shattering. That wasn't a major, we're not building new buildings or programs or anything else, but it was a vision, and it was something that we could go for and strive for. And I think overall we were successful, right? All right, so that's visioning. Not a lot there. Let's move on to reframing. Reframing is the next competency here in regard to strategic leadership. And, reframing is really just looking at things differently. Just looking at things differently. looking differently at challenges and opportunities and capabilities, and taking a step back and saying, okay, this is a challenge, but if we reframe it, what's it going to, how else can we look at that is kind of the idea. And really, I think, and it's that second bullet there, the key part of reframing involves uncovering the implicit beliefs and assumptions that we have. And so, and I put ladder of inference here. And if you've had the organizational systems course, you've heard me talk about the ladder of inference. And real quick, the ladder of inference is it is a descriptive model of decision making and how we move up the ladder to arrive at conclusions and then actions. And what we talk, the reason we teach it to people and to individuals is so that, not to tell them how to make decisions, but they're aware of how they are making decisions. And then we encourage them, before they act on those decisions, back down the ladder, particularly to one step or one rung on the ladder, which is interpretation. How am I interpreting the data that I have? And I don't just mean numbers data. I mean any kind of information, visual cues, verbal cues, emotions from other people, all those kind of things, right? How am I interpreting this data? Because that's going to be a big clue as to why I reached the decision or the conclusion that I did. And so I back down to interpretation, and this is a key part of it. What are my implicit beliefs and assumptions that I am carrying into this situation that are impacting and affecting my conclusions? And it may mean I need to reframe. So, for instance, I'm guessing that that this last spring, as we went through the shifts and transitions with COVID-19, that there was a lot of reframing going on for faculty members across the country, both within higher ed, college level, as well as K-12. Because the implicit belief and assumption that I would venture to say many, I'll just say many, not most, many teachers had was, my course, my class, this content cannot be taught online. Now, would they have ever actually stated that? And if you would have come to them in a different time and place and said, do you think you could move this online? Oh, yeah, probably. You see, most of us are agreeable when we're talking theoretical. But when we have to talk reality, all of a sudden it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. So I would venture to guess that there were a good number, many, in the in the teaching world who their implicit belief and assumption was, I cannot teach this content online. Now, maybe some of them have had that confirmed for them, or I shouldn't say the content, they're just not, they're not comfortable in that space. But those are the kind of things, and I have found this to be true. Again, at BJU, where we're talking about potentially moving our graduate program in communication online, and I was advocating for it. I said, I think there's a market for it. I think we're seeing more and more of these programs pop up. I think it's something we should give consideration to. And I had a couple of faculty members who were very, very resistant to that idea. And as we talk, and by the way, we never accomplished that. Their resistance was just too strong, and there were other things that were I needed to deal with more so than that. So I kind of let it go. But we had quite a few conversations. But knowing a little bit about this area, what I realized was, and I tried to surface those for them to get them to look at them. and face them. But there were a lot of implicit beliefs and assumptions, and some of them pertain to, you can't teach this content online. Well, why can't you? Well, because we need to have really good discussions, and I would agree. But there are ways that we can do it, and yeah, a discussion board is, I will say, is not quite the same experience as a live interaction discussion. But then there are other things that you can do online that you can't do face to face. And some of the implicit beliefs and assumptions had to do with their own comfort level with technology and teaching in that venue and other things. And so, but just to give you the idea, we have to surface those implicit beliefs and assumptions if we're going to move forward. And the truth is, sometimes we don't even know. And so it isn't just helping someone else come face to face with their implicit beliefs and assumptions. We need to surface our own, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that in the next lecture, talking about systems thinking and mental models. But we've got to confront those, and we've got to come face to face with them. So that's a key part of reframing. And then I want to point out too is that dialogue is a key to reframing, engaging in good dialogue. And this is what the book talks about when they talk about common sense and when they're talking about making common sense or establishing common sense. And I don't know about you, that it threw me off just a little bit. I'm like, well, what do you mean establishing common sense? What they mean is I prefer to put it this way, as the authors of Crucial Conversations put it, we have a pool of shared meaning. And that's a little easier for me, just because we use the term common sense. Well, it's common sense that you do this. And I understand why they use it, because it is common. And so what we want to do through reframing and through the dialogue is that we all agree on how we're looking at these things. Now, understand something. That doesn't mean that, I want to make sure I say this right. That doesn't mean that we're in consensus yet, or that we've reached consensus, or we may never reach consensus. But what we have to do when we come to the pool of shared, or when we create this pool of shared meaning and establish common sense, is we understand where everyone is coming from. And we even understand where we're coming from in relation to this topic or this challenge or this problem. And so often what happens is, I don't understand how you're approaching this, or I don't understand where you're coming from. And sometimes I don't even understand where I'm coming from on this, right? Because we haven't surfaced those implicit beliefs and assumptions. And the only way, though, to make sure that we have this pool of shared meaning, that we've reframed questions and challenges, and I know where you're coming from and you know where I'm coming from, and I've talked about here the fears, is through dialogue. Dialogue means all of the parties are talking and communicating and listening. Monologue is one person. Dialogue is at least two people. And so we have to make sure that we're engaging in effective dialogue. And one of the keys to effective dialogue is effective questioning techniques. And I talk about this again in 9:18 when we talk about the ladder of inference. Effective question techniques, effective questioning, means I'm asking questions in such a way that I am not provoking defensiveness. And so that's a key part. It's getting others. When I'm engaging in effective questioning, I'm getting others to articulate their ideas, their assumptions, their beliefs, their fears, etc., on and on, without inciting or provoking defensiveness. And that's a key part of effective questioning. Because I can ask you questions trying to get at those things. What are your ideas, your assumptions, your beliefs? What are your fears? I can ask that, and I can do it in such a way that I will immediately provoke defensiveness in you. If we're talking about a change, right, and we're going to be talking about organizational change at the end of the course, but if we're talking about change, there's a lot of fears that go with that. So we're talking about change, and I say, what are you so afraid of? Not even my tone. Even if I say, well, what are you so afraid of? Even if I ask it that way, in a more pleasant way, I don't know about you, I'm going to get defensive right away. I'm not afraid of anything, right? So I have to figure out, how do I ask questions to get you to articulate your fears? Because the reality is, you have them. I have them. When we're going through big change within our organization, even our department, there are real legitimate fears. People are afraid of losing their status. They're afraid of losing their jobs. They're afraid of potentially then losing income. And they're real fears. And so we have to address those, but I need to do it and get you to talk about those in an effective way without getting you defensive. I shouldn't say getting you. That puts the blame on you. Without me provoking defensiveness in you. And so that's the key to effective questioning. So a lot of open-ended questions and things like that. And then just a couple of practical suggestions when it comes to dialogue, some things I've learned from others through the years, and I've found these to be true myself, is a practical suggestion: get rid of the tables. If you really, and I'm not saying you need to get rid of tables for every single meeting. If it's a kind of a status check or status check, those kind of things, progress report kind of meetings, tables are fine. But if you really need to engage in dialogue, if you're dealing with some big things, some big topics, people are going to have these fears and unknowns and things like that, I would encourage you to try and do it in a setting where there are no tables, because tables are a barrier. And we can hide behind tables, or they feel like there's something between us. Whenever I have a serious conversation with someone, whether it's a student or a faculty member, I come out from behind my desk and we just sit open, because that desk is a barrier. And so that's just kind of a practical thing to think about as you're working through these things. And then one more thing I didn't talk about, because I think the book does a good job, but those 4 ways of communicating that the book talks about in regard to reframing. I would encourage you to really look at those, read those, think about those. I have worked with a guy in the past by the name of Ray Jorgensen, and he has a lot of similar ideas to that. He phrases it differently, but those same ideas that are in those 4 ways of communicating, kind of setting the context for the meeting and making sure everybody understands, here's what we're trying to get out of this meeting, and we're in agreement on that, and those kind of things, boy, they can really help you as you're engaging in this reframing and in the dialogue to move things forward. So hopefully that was helpful to you, and we'll see you in the next lecture, final lecture for this module on systems thinking. I do want to say one thing. I'm going to have a couple of videos in there where individuals are talking about systems thinking, and I would encourage you watch, and I'm going to put those in the order there in the module, but watch those first, then watch the lecture on systems thinking, and I think that'll be helpful to you. We'll see you in the next lecture.